Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cover 3 Radio Show here on EC Radio and on YouTube. My name is Cody, also go by Shaq. Today we are back for another show. Last week we had Brian and Joe on NCAA March Madness Tournament, which we will also cover on for today, as well as some MLB stuff and a firing in the NBA, which is probably for the best. So let's actually hop right into it. And the big story this week is the firing, or not the firing, but rather the loss that Duke University, the number one overall seed in this year's tournament, has officially gone down in a thrilling game to Michigan State. Michigan State did pull up the upset, and I didn't trust Duke in close games. Duke in close games was very frightening. Also, this weekend, they had a very close game to Virginia Tech that Virginia Tech probably could have won if it wasn't for a missed layup at the end. They struggled. They had two of the luckiest wins against UCF, against Virginia Tech. We touched on the UCF game last week, and this week, Virginia Tech played them very close. And the two things they don't do very well is shooting from the 3-point line and free throws. And those are the two things you need in this tournament. Someone who can stretch the floor, someone that can shoot threes effectively, and especially when it comes down to crunch time, someone to make free throws. And Duke didn't have that, on top of, I believe, 17 turnovers as well. And Michigan State played very well. Cassius Winston was a Big 12 Player of the Year, who playing point guard. He had a great game, controlling the pace. It was just a good team win by Michigan State. And they're moving on to the Final Four, which surprised me. I thought Duke was there. A lot of people thought Duke was there. A lot of people had Duke winning this whole thing. But Duke does go down, which is I wouldn't say very surprising, but it was definitely a good game. All of these games these last few weeks, these last 2 weeks in particular, have been extraordinary. And that's all I care for. I want chaos and I want good games. And this past weekend, I don't think there was a bad game on. So Duke is out. They ended up beating Virginia Tech, and then they ended up losing to Michigan State. Michigan State ended up beating LSU in one of the more lopsided games over this last weekend, won by 17 points. It wasn't really that close. I had LSU going into the Elite Eight against Duke, but Michigan State has been one of the best teams, arguably should have been a 1 seed in a lot of people's minds. And they ended up steamrolling through their competition until they got to Duke, and they hung in, and they made the plays when they counted. They played phenomenal, and they're moving on to the Final Four. Look, on the other side of the bracket, I don't want to say boring, but a game, Virginia, Oregon, and it was a low scoring game. 53-49 was the final score. Virginia ended up coming away with that victory. They played well this weekend as well. They'll also be in the Final Four. They faced Purdue, who beat Tennessee in just an absolute gut-wrencher for our good friend Joseph. That was a really good, I believe, an overtime game. Carson Edwards went off. He had a great game. An absolute clutch shot, I believe, by Klein. And just a fadeaway three for the tie with like 40 seconds left. And absolutely one of the shots you'll be seeing from years and years to come. And that was a great game as well. And they ended up playing Virginia in one of the most ridiculous shots to send it into overtime I've ever seen in my life. If you haven't seen it, I do encourage you, as I always make a suggestion, I do encourage you to go to YouTube and look up, the ending of the Purdue game. It was an absolutely insane game. Carson Edwards had about 45 on that game. He played phenomenal all tournament. And just Virginia came out with a win. So the final play that sent into overtime, I was just talking about, Virginia player was on the line. I forget exactly what player. He missed the first free throw, intentionally missed the second free throw. Ball was tapped out all the way to half court. Basically, so from half court, it was a pass to a player on the short corner, and he legit turned shot buckets as time expired. He shot with like .4 left on the clock. It was an absolutely insane shot. I do encourage anyone to go and look at that shot. It was absolutely fantastic. So that has that set. So Virginia wins the bracket on the south side. Michigan State wins on side, if we go down to the Midwest and the West, Gonzaga took the L. Gonzaga ended up losing. Well, they beat Florida State in a pretty handed game. They won by about 14, 16. Can't really do math. About 14. Against Florida State, close game. Gonzaga ended up pulling away. Texas Tech just steamrolled Michigan. It was a not as competitive a game as a lot of people thought. I believe I had Texas Tech winning that game, and they did. And then Gonzaga, Texas Tech. There was some late game execution that did not go the way of the Zags. They were down by 3 after a crazy shot by Josh Perkins, and then Josh Perkins accidentally reached over the end line as an inbound pass was coming, which is technically a technical foul, which gave Texas Tech 2 shots and the ball back, which put them up by 5, 6, and that was all she wrote. That hurts my heart, Gonzaga. They were my winners of this year's bracket, and they go home empty-handed again this year. Houston, Kentucky. Kentucky ended up winning that one in a close one. I watched that one kind of half-heartedly. It was, I watched a lot of basketballs. I had doing homework probably, and that ended up being a pretty good game. Auburn, North Carolina was a big surprise. Auburn absolutely steamrolled North Carolina. North Carolina, to a lot of people, are the best team in the country, the most talented team overall team in the country, and they got obliterated by Auburn. The one thing that sucked about that game was Chima Okeke, who is basically Auburn's best player, tore his ACL in that one, and trying to spin, went to plant his foot, and his knee just gave out, buckled out, and it's sad. I mean, even for an Auburn player, as I am an Alabama fan, and I really do not like Auburn. It is sad to see a player like that, especially having a really good tournament. I think he had 20 points and was 10 for 13 in the field in that game or the game before, and he had a really good. He was a big reason why they were there, and that did him go down. But he was honored before the game. One of the players put his jersey on during warm-ups, and they ended up beating Kentucky in a very close game as well. So Auburn end up being your winner of the South Midwest region, and the West region won by Texas Tech. So we look forward to this weekend, this Saturday. Michigan State, Texas Tech, Virginia, Auburn is the matchup. If I am to pick 2 winners, it's tough. I think I'm going to go Michigan State on the left side and Auburn to beat Virginia. I just think Auburn has all the emotion riding on to the lowest seed remaining, a 5 seed, lowest seed remaining. They have Virginia, who has had struggles in the past. They almost didn't beat Purdue. They almost didn't beat Oregon. Oklahoma they put away, but Oklahoma loomed around, and Gardner Webb in the first round, the 16 seed, actually had like a 10-point lead on Virginia. So they're one of those teams where on paper they should be the best team, and a lot of people think that, and they are, especially in the regular season. As you see, I got my head shaved for those watching on YouTube. Got the head whacked. But anyway, Virginia has a lot of struggles in March. And Auburn is hot right now. They might be the hottest team in this tournament. The one thing for Michigan State and Texas Tech, the one thing you see if you look at the pattern is they've blown their opponents out until last round, the Elite Eight, and they beat probably the 2 best teams in a very close game, and they proved they had it. I'm just going to go Michigan State because of Cassius Winston and that leadership for Tom Izzo. Jarrett Culver is probably the best player on the court on Texas Tech and just in the game overall. And Texas Tech I've watched, and they're very athletic, very fast. They move up and down the court. They have some good defense, especially on the wings, and they have a big man, stretch 4, I forget what his name is, but he can get out there, and he blocked a 3-pointer on Rui Hachimura, which was very clutch as well. So I'm just going to take Michigan State just because of the experience, just because of the talent in the coaching staff, as well as that veteran leadership, both in the coaching staff and on the court with Cassius Winston. And they were saying during when they were beating Duke, this is not the most talented team that Tom Izzo has had. This might be one of the lower ends, at least the last 5-6 years in terms of talent. They just have that it factor. They have that. So Michigan State, Auburn, the championship. I think I'm going to go Michigan State as well. I think Michigan State pulls this one out and wins it all. Like I had them winning 2015, and they got lost at Middle Tennessee State, which actually was dope because then Syracuse went on a run. Anyway, mixed feelings about 2015. But as much as Auburn's hot, as much as they're playing together as a team for Okiki, I just think it's just Michigan State's year. I think this is the year that Tom Izzo gets another ring and cements himself firmly as one of the best coaches in the history of college basketball. Already is, in my opinion, at least that from my generation, from me, since I've been watching college basketball. He'll put himself up there with the Coach K's, with the Jim Boeheims, with the Roy Williamses, with the Dean Smithses, with the John Woodens, and with all those high praising coaches, the John Thompsons as well. And I'm definitely forgetting many, many names, but there's a rich history of college basketball, and he is going to be remembered as one of the best to do it. So that is what I have for that March Madness. Anything else I want to talk about? So Duke in close games just don't give it to me just because of the free throws, because of the three-pointers, and we saw that R.J. Barrett missed a clutch free throw and some clutch shots at the end of the game. And then that's how I believe the weekend will go. So we're going to move on, transition into the Issa Yikes moment of the week. The Issa Yikes moment of the week. And the Issa Yikes moment of the week goes to Ernie Grunfeld, who was just fired today, I believe, as the general manager of the Washington Wizards. Now, I have this article up. And it is by Frank J. Platko on DMVSportsNetwork.com. This was posted November 10th, 2018. And this was all the stupid things that Ernie Grunfeld has done since becoming the general manager of the Wizards 15 years ago. Now, he states that since 2003, the Wizards have a winning percentage of 44%, which is 23rd out of all 30 teams. They only have one division title and no Eastern Conference Finals period. So how he lasts this long, up for debate. First one, so this is sort of listed as big things. Gilbert Arenas contract section in 2008. One of the best players in the mid 2000s. He had a really, really short prime because of injuries, and that's why they gave him this contract right after injuries. 6 years, $111 million after getting surgeries on his ACL and MCL. Was never the same. That was at next season. That's when the whole gun incident happened, and he ended up going to Orlando and fizzling out there. Questionable move. Drafting John Vesley. Oh, lordy lord. 2011. That was the year of Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. And number 6, John Vesley was signed. When you have Paul George, you have Gordon Hayward, you have Kawhi Leonard, you have Klay Thompson, all drafted. Jimmy Butler in that draft as well, and I believe Isaiah Thomas as well. All of those guys drafted in the later rounds, lower than 6, and they picked John Vesley, who only lasted maybe 2 years in the NBA. That was a questionable move. They also traded the 5th overall pick in 2009, same draft class that hosted Stephen Curry, that hosted DeMar DeRozan, and picks later than Drew Holiday as well. And they selected no one because they traded that pick, which ended up becoming Ricky Rubio, for Randy Foye and Mike Miller, who did all right, but only lasted 1 season in Washington. So they could have potentially matched Curry up or DeMar DeRozan up or Drew Holiday up with John Wall and ran with that. But no, we'll get Mike Miller and Randy Foye because that's how general managing works. Or before they got John Wall, rather. Some questionable contracts. Signing Jan Mahimi to a 4-year, $64 million contract. If you guys don't know who Jan Mahimi is, it's probably a reason, because he's not that great. Andrew Nicholson, 4 years, $26 million contract. Yikes. Signing Jason Smith with 3 years, $16 million contract. Yikes. Trading Jordan Clarkson for cash considerations. Yikes. A 2011 class, like we mentioned with John Vesley, also drafted Chris Singleton when Jimmy Butler was still on the board. Trading a first-round pick, which I get that one because they were contending that year, but there's just a laundry list of unfortunate things that this man did for the Washington Wizards. And lordy lord, you are the Issa Yikes Moment of the week, Ernie Gordonfield. Now, for the majority of the show, we're going to be talking about some off-season contract extension in major leagues. Now, baseball just started up, and the Red Sox are 1-4 to begin the year. Dope. Other than that, there have been some exciting news out of Boston, which we'll get in a minute. But we're going to start way back earlier on the beginning of the season during spring training when some of these players, high-profile players, were signed to multi-year extensions. And there's over, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's a lot of millions that was doled out this offseason that weren't in free agency. And we'll start with Alex Bregman. Alex Bregman and the Houston Astros agreed to a $100 million contract. Now, Alex Bregman right now is, I believe, 24, 25. He is 25 years of age. Last year, batted .286 with 51 doubles that led the majors, 31 home runs, 103 RBI, 10 stolen bases a year prior, his rookie year, .284 with 39 doubles, 19 home runs, 71 RBI, plays a good third base, fifth in All-Star MVP voting last year, and was an All-Star. He was also one of the hottest postseason hitters last year. As he hit .556 in the first round, a disappointing series versus Boston, but he absolutely lit up the Indians, and he's had good postseasons in the past, and he's going to be a great player. I think 5 years, 100 million, that gets him to free agency, or a year extended to free agency, so that he'll be 30 at that time. 100 million, so that's $20 million a year. I think it's an A deal. I think Alex Bregman could be considered potentially a 5-tool prospect, a 5-tool player, maybe probably like 4-tool, hits for good average, hits for good power. I think the speed's a little lower. If you consider that tool, all depends on what you consider, what you don't, and where your cutoff is. But he's a phenomenal player, probably a top 10 player right now in the major leagues. And for signing him up, locking him up till age 30, let him hit free agency, and you can see how much really people are going to give him because it'd be 30. Those 10-year contracts are put in play until he's 40. They avoid a huge payday, but still gets Bregman $20 million a year over the next 5. I think it's an A deal for both sides. Stays on a competitive team, locks him up. All they got to do is get Correa and Springer next, and we'll see how they manage that. They also have Garrett Cole. Justin Verlander, they signed to a 2-year, $66 million contract, which is also an A-plus deal for how good Verlander has been. So you get 2 for 1, because I forgot to add Verlander to this list. But A deal to keep Alex Bregman in Houston for the next 6 years. Now, here's a doozy. Mike Trout, 12 years, $430 million. We've talked about this contract in shows prior, and oh lordy, that is a gargantuan contract, and he deserves it. Mike Trout is far and away the best player in the major leagues. You could argue that the gap between the best player and the second base best player is the highest in the major leagues when you're talking about Mike Trout and Mookie Betts. And you look at their raw stats and bang, like they're right there. Even Mookie you can consider had a better year last year, but Mike Trout is better than Mookie Betts by a considerable margin. And I don't think there's another sport where you look at the number 1, number 2 players and there's that much of a gap. I just think Mike Trout was on another level than anybody else, and a lot of people think that way as well. Mookie is closing that gap, though. He's an absolute stud, and I'm not saying Mookie's a bad player, but he's just a phenomenal. But I just think that the gap between him and Mike Trout is this $430 million mega deal. Now I give this deal an A-, and also I love keeping Trout in California. He's loved it there. He's wanted to stay there. The Angels hurt my head, and here's why. They have only been to 1 playoffs while having arguably one of the greatest players of all time. Probably, in my opinion, could go down as the greatest player of all time. If you subtract Babe Ruth, or even with Babe Ruth. That's how good this kid is. They've only been once. They've whiffed on deals with Josh Hamilton, C.J. Wilson, Albert Pujols. They whiffed on deals. They have Justin Upton's been a good signing. Their pitching staff is still a little bit raw. But if you look at Mike Trout and his stats, man, are just absolutely ridiculous. Oh my God. Last year, if you look at last year, he's batted. He was second in the MVP last year, fourth the year prior, first, second, first, second, second. He's never finished below fourth in an MVP race. And he's 27 years old. This is his year 27. This is his age 27 year. He is just an absolute animal. Led the league in on base percentage the last 3 years, slugging in 2017 and 2015. OPS the last 2 years and in 2015 as well. OPS plus the last 4 years and at the age of 20. Led the league in stolen bases with 49 at the age of 20. Led the league in runs 40 years out of his 8. Like, he is an absolute tank. Hits well over 30 shots. 39, 33, 29, 41, 36, 27, 30 in the last, basically his career. Only over 100 RBI twice, but he bats leadoff in second. Like, he doesn't get that many, as many opportunities as well. Walks a ton. He is just plays stellar defense, steals bases. He had 40, 230 steal seasons, and then mid-20s. He just steals and just does all this great stuff, and he deserves that. Like I said, far and away, he's the LeBron James of baseball. There's just no touching him. There's just him and then everybody else. So he deserves that deal. A- only for the sole fact. They do have Shohei Ohtani, which is dope. But my gripe is you're paying all this money. He's going to be getting 40, 45 million a year soon at the end of that contract. And if you don't put the necessary farm system is doing a bit better. They were in the end of the league now. I believe they're like middle tier or like high 20s, mid teens if on MLB.com, if I remember correctly, beginning of the year. They need to make moves, and they need to make moves that stick. They can't fool around and get any more Albert Pujolses or Josh Hamilton. Pujols has been all right, but not lived up to his contract that he got. But they can't afford any more C.J. Wilsons or Josh Hamiltons. They have to hit at least Pujolses, which the contract still looks a little iffy, but they're still producing. They're still doing the job. And they're getting Trout into the playoffs and letting him work his magic. The pitching rotation has to get bolstered a little bit, but I think they'll be good. I give this an A-. Next up, Eloy Jimenez. Eloy Jimenez is a top 3 prospect in all of baseball, playing for the Chicago White Sox. He got 6 years, $43 million, and I give this deal a B+. Now, Eloy Jimenez has been raking. He's been absolutely tearing it up in the minor leagues. I was in AAA for a lot of last year. But I'm actually going to look him up. I think he was the only player I didn't pull up. The one thing I like about this deal is it gets him to 6 years, which will get him right to his service time. And that's if you look at the years given to a lot of these players, it gets them like a little bit past their service time. And he ended up making the club this year, and he is playing in the major leagues. And that's the thing; he gets it right to his time in when he's eligible for free agency. So that is the one thing, or the deal sort of hits me, at least for the Chicago White Sox's side. For Eloy Jimenez, this is beautiful. He is of the age of 22 at the moment, at 215 spring. He is going to be a very, very good player. Now, the one thing is I haven't really seen him in the major leagues, and sometimes you do have those players that are just fantastic in the minor leagues, and they just never figure it out in the major leagues. I don't think that's going to be Eloy Jimenez's deal, but it could be. And the one thing that keeps this a B+ because of that if factor. And they have a lot of prospects they can go through, and if some of them don't pan out, they still have like a Yohan Moncada, or they still have a Kopech or Dylan Cease or all these other prospects they have. And they can make that work. But the plus is only because it gets him right to 6 years, and if he's a stud at age 28 going in the open market, he's going to command buco bucks. And We'll just see what Chicago has to do. I give that deal a B plus, mostly because you don't really know what he's done yet. It's only about 6 times 8 is 48. So this is a little bit under 8 years, or $8 million a year, around 7.5 to 7, just a little bit over $7 million a year, which could end up being a steal in year 5 or just a headache in year 4 or 5. So B plus, though I still like. Blake Snellzilla, he got himself paid as well. 5 years, $50 million, deal that will be effective this year. Last year won the Cy Young, had an absolutely phenomenal year last year in his I'd say his second full season. He led the league with a 1.89 ERA, 180 innings pitched. I'm trying to find a .974 WHIP, 5.6 hits per nine, which was the lowest. It's on the Cy Young, was ninth in MVP voting, an All-Star. He had an absolutely 21 wins as well. He had an absolutely fantastic year for a very, very good up-and-coming Tampa Bay Rays team that wasn't supposed to be this good, this quick. And he will be 30 when his deal is done. $50 million a year, $10 million a year. I think he could have got more, but I think it's an A deal for the Rays. You get your Cy Young player locked up to at least 30 for $50 million a year. Also, if you still don't have the team you really want and you start flipping, they do have Christian Arroyo and Brandon McKay coming up soon. At the moment, Jake Bowers is their young first baseman. Also have Willie Adames, and him and Arroyo will be the left side of the infield most likely in the near future. If they don't pan out, you don't get the results. That's an easy contract to trade for top prospects and restart again as well. If he's 28, 29, you're not going anywhere. That's only $10 million for a potential ace. You can ship him around, get very, very good. You could command like a top 5 prospect with that type of deal, depending on what the team is and how they want to go about the trade. But you can get a pretty penny back for a really good contract. I would give this an A for the Rays, keeping your star player locked up for a nice little bargain in my opinion. Let's move on to our next player. That's Chris Sale. 5 years, $150 million, and I give this one a B. Now, timeout. I love this deal for the Red Sox. I do. Being a Red Sox fan, I love getting our ace paid. Got it good. Awesome. $30 million a year, which is lower than Price even, which is pretty insane as well. Take him out of free agency. You take him away from the bidding war. He won a World Series, 7-time All-Star. Historically, the best strikeout per 9 pitcher in all of the league. And strikeouts per walk as well. He is filthy. The one gripe I have with it, burns himself out, and by the time September and August roll around, he dies. Now, last year in 158 innings, which he 12-4, 2.11 ERA, 237 strikeouts, which is good for 13.5 strikeouts per 9 innings, which easily would have won. Would have been the most in the majors. He just didn't qualify. He was 4th in the Cy Young voting. He didn't qualify for a lot of the major categories. 22nd MVP voting, was an all-star starter. By the time he had that injury with the shoulder or the elbow in late July, he didn't play all of August. He played sparingly in September. By the time the playoffs came around, he was throwing 89, which scared the living hell out of me, considering he throws 97 and was hitting 100 earlier on the season. And that's the one thing that pulls me back from this deal and gives it only a B, because this could work great for the Red Sox, or it could just bite them in the ass like some of their deals do. Because if the Red Sox are going to be a top team, which they will be for the next few years, especially when we're going to talk about someone else pretty soon, staying with the Red Sox. the next 7 years, which I'm excited for. But anyway, if you're going to be in the postseason, which is expected, you're going to be in October, which is expected, and if you're going to be in late October, which is also expected, especially after this group won the World Series last year, you're going to have to pace yourself. Now, if that means you taking 2 starts off a month, I'm fine with that. If instead of pitching 32 games a year, you pitch 27, 26, I'm fine with that. That's okay. If you have if you have a stat line from last year, just with the innings up a little bit, and you just space out his games, and he doesn't have a noodle arm, that's golden. That will be the hardest pitcher to hit off of in the postseason, maybe ever. Like, that's how good Chris Sale is, especially with his slider from the left-hand side, especially with his fastball coming at you like an absolute nuke. Especially with his deception. He throws his slider at the same arm angle as his fastball. You can't hit that. You can't hit that. People haven't been able to hit that. It just comes when it gets to September, and October, he just crumbles up because he's worn out. He's hurt. He's too exhausted, and he's a competitor. He loves to pitch. You know, there have been times with the White Sox where he's got fights with managers because they're like, Chris, we're going to have you sit out a day. And he goes, no, that's BS. I am going out there and pitching. And it hurts sometimes. And sometimes as a player, and I understand that competitive edge, I remember one time I was playing basketball. I sprained my ankle pretty decent, and we were already down by 20 with 10 minutes left. And my coach was like, "All right, Cody, you're gonna sit the rest of the game, or you're gonna sit down." And then 2 minutes later, took the ice pack off. Like, "Coach, I'm going in." It's like, "No, you're sitting down." I'm like, "Coach, I'm going in." I'm like, "All right, go in." And it did. I mean, my leg hurt like a sailor, but I needed to play. I had to play. It's what it was. I was competitive, and I had to be competitive to I thought I could bring the team back, which, fun fact, we didn't. I think we ended up losing more by the time I got in. But I have to play. I just have to go. I just have to do it. That's the mindset that you have, and that's the mindset Chris Sale has. If it's his turn to pitch, he's pitching. He doesn't care. He could have 3 extra legs, or he could lose all his toes. He's going out there and pitching. That's the mindset, and it bites you in the butt sometimes. You come back from injury. I lost my entire senior season of basketball. I came back too quick. Wasn't healed. Ended up re-injuring myself the first day of practice, and missed my entire senior season of basketball. It sucks. Ask my mom. Ask how upset I was, and just overall depressed because I couldn't play basketball anymore. It sucks. But anyway, you have to learn to take just a little edge off yourself. Once October rolls around, turn that up to 11.5. But in April, May, you can have an 8, where you'll go out there and you'll pitch your best. But if you have to miss a start, or you have to just have 2 extra days of rest because you have Brian Johnson that can give you a spot start. You have Stephen Wright when he comes back to give you a spot start, depending on what they do with Eovaldi, which they'll most likely, as my phone starts ringing, as I did not put my phone on vibrate or silent. Apologies. If you have Brian Johnson give you a spot start. You have most likely Stephen Wright in the bullpen when he comes back. You have players like Workman who can give you 2-3 innings. You could try the opener thing with our bullpen, which I don't know. No, scratch that. Depending on how Erod, Eovaldi, and Wright play, all 3 of them could be in the late innings to 6-man. It can go with a 6-man rotation, and you know what? I would not mind that at all, especially for how good this team is. And if you just all 6 of those guys deserve a starting spot in our rotation. Maybe Stephen Wright. I'm a little still iffy on the knuckleball thing, but he was an all-star a couple years ago, and he pitched very, very well for us for the Red Sox. So you can do that. So that's the only reason, as I'm starting to digress and realize I have more contact to get through. That's the reason why this is only a B. Because if he doesn't learn how to do that, this deal could be bad. But anyway, it's still a good deal. I'm still happy about it. B for me. Paul Goldschmidt gets a 5-year, $130 million extension in St. Louis, A-. Now, Paul Goldschmidt is a top 15, probably top 15, top 10 player He's in that range in the major leagues. Has 213 career home runs, a 290 hitter, who was second MVP voting twice, third 2 years ago, and sixth last year. He's an absolute stud. Home run totals of 36, 33, 36, 33, sprinkled in the last few years. 125, 120, 110 RBI in the last few years. Steals bases like mad. Gets on base is a 297 career hitter, 290 last year, 297 the 2 years prior, and then in the 300s the 3 years prior, 321 is his career best. Gets on base at the 400 clip you want. Slugs in the high 500s, OPS in the high 900s, even thousands for 2 seasons. He's absolute monster, and he already has 4 home runs and 8 RBI in the first 5 games of the season. So absolute stud. That contract already is starting to prove great. It solidifies the first base position of the Cardinals. They get their franchise hitter. That I don't want to say Pujols because I don't think he put up the production that Pujols did, but maybe similar numbers actually. You really look at it, but he gives them their three hitter, their best hitter that they've had since Albert Pujols, and they put him there with Matt Carpenter. You still have Yadier Molina. I give this an A minus. It comes out to like $26 million a year. I think that's great. He'll get paid till he's 36. Dope deal. I love that deal. A minus in my opinion. Kyle Hendricks, 4 years, $55.5 million. There are a couple clauses in there which could move it up, move it down. Anyway, he had himself. He's had a good career in Chicago. He has a career 3.07 ERA, which is actually a lot better than I thought. Not a strikeout pitcher by any means. Only 627 strikeouts in 6 years, which is good for like 100 or so a season. 167, 170, 161. So he does actually have that strikeout potential. What he is he's not a flamethrower. So he's sinker, changeup, cutter, fastball, curveball. He'll move just a little. He'll move just a little bit. So ball come here, then do this. Ball come here, do that. Ball come here and stay. Ball come here and drop. So he keeps hitters on edge like that, much like Porcello did his Cy Young season, which that same season, Kyle Hendricks had a 2.13 ERA. It was third in Cy Young, 23rd in MVP. I could have sworn he won that Cy Young that year. Had a 3.03 ERA the next year, 3.44 the last year. He's been a great pitcher that I think people underlook. The one thing that you do see, why I give this deal a B, it's $11 million a year, until he's 34. And you see it with Rick Porcello as well, where they have similar pitching styles and how they use their sinker and how they use their two-seam and how they use their changeup off their fastball, and that's how they get a lot of their outs, just miss contact. That's a pitcher that doesn't throw that hard. If you just don't have it one year or you don't have it one game, you're bound to get lit up. If he has to keep that dive, that dip, that dodge, dip, duck, dive, and dodge. He has to dodge ball, hit all his pitches. If he doesn't have it, and he has those Rick Porcello years where he had mid-4 ERAs sandwiched between a great Cy Young season, he has to do that. Can he do that? Maybe. I'm not going to front. I have not watched a lot of Kyle Hendricks. The raw stats say he's a really, really good pitcher. Maybe it's just the name. It's not a big name, and that sort of deters me from it. $11 million ain't that bad. I give it a B, just like Chris Sale, because this had the potential to be really, really good, but also the potential to be pretty not great. It's only 11. It's not $30 million. So actually, I'm going to upgrade this to a B plus. I will upgrade this mid-episode upgrade B plus. So I'll give that one a B plus. It could go a little bit south, but it's only $11 million a year, so it's not that huge of a deal. Looks like he missed some time in 2017 as well. So I'm giving a B plus to Kyle Hendricks and the Chicago Cubs. 3 left. We have Jacob deGrom, 4 years, $120 million. Bada bing, bada boom, A for you. Jacob deGrom last year, one of the best years I've ever seen. 1.7 ERA, only one. He had a 10-9 record, which is absolutely blasphemous. Every player on that Mets team should have bought him a car or two. That's how much that season, just disrespectful to Jake DeGrom. 217 innings pitched, 269 strikeouts, a .912 WHIP, which was just insane. Cy Young, fifth in MVP, an All-Star. He was phenomenal. Now, his track record last year was a great season, and he has a career 2.65 ERA. He had a 2.69 ERA his first year, which gave him the Rookie of the Year. 2.54 the next year, which gave him All-Star berth as well. 304, 353, and then there's 1.7 gem he threw last year. He's been a very great pitcher, especially when you talk about the Mets rotation the last few years, especially when they were in the World Series that year. They had Matz, they had Harvey, they had Syndergaard, they had DeGrom. And of those four, DeGrom was supposed to be the third best, even some people the fourth best out of that whole squad. Matt Harvey was already an ace. Syndergaard was throwing gas. DeGrom was that poofy-haired dude, and he's arguably the best of those three. Syndergaard's dope, but he's been probably the best of those three over the last few years. Harvey fell off a cliff. Matz, I had never heard from him, and Syndergaard's been good, but I think he was hurt for a lot of last year. DeGrom has been that guy. One thing, he is 31, which actually surprised me when I was looking at it, how old he was. He didn't break out into the league at 6. But 4 years, get him to he's 34, $120 million a year. For the year he had, I think that's a great deal. That's an A for the Mets. Next up, Xander Bogaerts. 7 years, $130 million a year, A+. Here's why. Statistically, he is one of the top 4 shortstops in the game. Statistically. Would I say he's a top 3-4 shortstop? I could see like 4. I think Lindor's the best shortstop in the game. Actually, you could argue Xander's the second best shortstop in the game. Depends on, Corey Seager was hurt last year. He might be better than Bogaerts and most likely will in the long run. Carlos Correa will probably be better in the long run than Bogey and a few other shortstops up and coming. But Bogaerts has been one of the more consistent players in Trevor Story as well. You can put in the conversation as best young shortstops or top young shortstops. But Bogaerts has been one of the best in the business in the last few years. He had a rough rookie season where he only hit 240, I want to say. 240. Look at Cody Nolan. Stinks. He hit 320 the next year, and he only had 7 home runs. So you're like, ugh, is he going to be one of those guys who just hits slaps hits and not going to get a lot of home runs? He had 21 the next year with a 294 average, all-star, silver slugger at shortstop, third base, 23 years old. And then the next year, 273 with only 10 home runs, but he hurt his wrist and was playing through it. And then last year, 136 games, easily the lowest he's had at age 25, 288, 23 home runs, 103 RBI. He was an absolute tank. He's a good defender. I wouldn't say he's a great defender, but he's improved a lot as a defender at the shortstop position over his time here in Boston. On-base percentage is pretty good. His slugging percentage has always been good. OPS is good. He had some low years in the beginning of his career. Brings his averages down, but he's been one of the best offensive shortstops, if not the best offensive shortstop. If you put him and Machado's numbers together, they are equal. The home runs favor Machado, but other than that, they are tight in the defense favor as well. Other than those two things, they are tight together. And, one got a $300 million contract and one got a $130 million contract. On top of, just Machado's deal was a deal for a shortstop, quote unquote. He's playing third base again, but he played last year so he could get all that money. And then you put it onto the fact that his agent, Scott Boras, he just had a record-setting, Machado had a record-setting deal. You just let Bogey go in a free agency. You could command I was talking to my friend. He said that Bogey, if he played up this year, he probably could have got $50 million more or more than that. I would not have been surprised if a team threw him a $200 million contract. If the bidding war, or 180, 190 in that range, if the bidding war was there and they really wanted Xander Bogaerts and he had a year comparable to his last 3 years, boom. There you go. He could have got it, I think. MVP 13th in MVP voting last year as well. He's an absolute tank. Stays in Boston until he is 34, 33, 34. It's going to be great. He's basically going to stay his entire career in Boston. By the time he hits free agency, he's not going to be getting those big contracts. And if they are, it's going to be short-term deals. He's staying. He wanted to stay. He needed to stay, and he is staying. Beautiful job by Bogaerts and the Red Sox. A-plus deal. Now, this deal that just happened earlier on today was for Ronald Acuna. 8 years, $100 million. I gave this an A plus for all the pluses onto this deal. This was a fantastic deal for both sides, and here's why. Ronald Acuna is 21 years old. Last year at the age of 20, I'm 20. So it's like if I went out in the major leagues against players who throw out 97 and hit 26 home runs, 64 RBI, hit 293, had 16 stolen bases, was Rookie of the Year and 12th at MVP voting for a first place team in only 111 games, had 127 hits in 111 games. Brain-shattering numbers for a 20-year-old. This deal will bring him till he is 29 years old, which is prime free agency. He gets $100 million for the next 8 years. Atlanta locks him up. He gets his bag. He can re-enter free agency at the age of 29 and get another mega deal, which would be probably about that time in the 300s easy, potentially the 400s. That's how good this guy is. 21, like I said, it is just absolutely a steal of a deal. And it's a fair deal at the same time. I mean, he had a four WAR season last year. He's just an absolute freak of nature. That's a great deal because, like I said, he can re-enter in a few days. Not a few days. In 8 years, he'll be 29 at the prime of his career, and it is just. It's a fantastic deal for both sides. He gets his paper, he gets his bag, gets his bread, and then on top of that, he stays in Atlanta for 8 years at least. Atlanta has that much time to put a contender, a true contender. I think there are a contender now, but a superstar team of Dansby Swanson, Ozzie Albies as they progress, and Riley as well, and they have a lot of young arms that by the time the 8-year deal is up, they'll we'll see if they panned out or not. And there's something brewing down in Atlanta. And it's great, and I give that an A plus. Now the Bogaerts deal is interesting. As we're going to move on to a little bit more contract talk and then wrap up the show. What does this mean for the young shortstops coming up? I mean Carlos Correa, I mean Corey Seager, I mean Francisco Lindor, and I mean Trevor Story. They could easily get these $180, $200 million deals. I think Bogaerts did himself a disservice in the money department. He could have got a lot more money, I think, if he waited it out. But he wanted to be on the team he wanted to be on. He wanted to be a part of this group of players. It's the only organization he's known for the last 10 years when he signed him. Aruba at the age of 16. He loves it here. He's a 2-time champion. He is the Red Sox, and that's what he bleeds, and that's beautiful, and that's a great thing. These other shortstops could not be that way. If they got max deals, you could see $200 to $240 million contracts doled out to a Lindor or a Seager or a Correa. Story is a little bit lower on the list, but it hurts them. Bogaerts deal hurts them. He did go out for that max contract, and these guys produced better than he did, then they their contracts, and that would mean the $200 million